Do you ever wonder why your builds aren't getting praised by your friends? Why they're not bowing down to you as a professional, godly builder? Do you want to build incredible houses? Do you want to be able to blow people away with the sheer insanity of your professional, godly builderness? Well, then you came to the right place. Hi, I'm Alex, and I would consider myself a pretty good builder. Not to toot my own horn or anything, but I get a lot of praise on the things that I make. If you want some examples of some of the most impressive things I've made, here are some images on the screen now. So if you want to know if I'm a good builder or not, you tell me. Basically, the idea is that you should be able to trust that I will give you good advice. Anyway, if you want to improve your Minecraft builds, there's a lot of mistakes that a lot of people make. It's extraordinary how many people make these people. It's so many. But I can fix this by showing you 10 simple Minecraft building tricks that will help you improve your Minecraft builds. Let's get on with the video. So for this video, I'm going to focus almost entirely on houses, but you can use these tips in other builds as well. But first, we have to define what a house is. For the sake of today's video, I'm going to say that a house at the bare minimum needs to have a roof and at least 3 walls. Why 3 walls? Because triangles. You could also argue that that had more than 3 walls because of the fact that it's impossible to make a straight-sided triangle in Minecraft, but hey, we're just gonna go with the assumption that we don't do that. Basically, what this means is that the worst possible house that you could ever make is this. This is the worst house in Minecraft. I'm sorry to anyone that lives in this. Although I don't even see how you could live in this. It's not big enough to go inside. But this would be the bare... This is the worst house ever. And this brings me to my first tip of the day. Number 1. Size. You gotta make the house big enough to actually be a good house. Now you can actually live in it. So for the purpose of today's video, we're going to make the house maybe a 7 by 7. Basically, the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to show you the worst possible house in Minecraft and then use the 10 tips to improve the house until it becomes glorious. Now we have this. This is our house now. It's big enough to go inside, but it's not very effective as a house and is not very owner-friendly. If your house is too small for what you need it for, then that will give you some very big difficulties. There is something you may notice about this house though, and that is that the interior is only 2 blocks high. Don't ignore the block it's made out of for a moment. This brings me to simple tip number 2. Do not make the house any lower than a 3-block interior. The interior needs to have jumping space. Why? Because jumping around is faster and it's also just painful to have less movement in your house. Okay, make the interior big enough that you can actually move in it. This feels much better now, right? Number 3, the blocks. I'll explain more about this later on, but essentially when I build, I tend to have 3 main colors in the build. I have one color that most of the build is made out of, so all the walls and stuff. And then I have another color that tends to make up the second most amount of blocks. So that could be stuff like framing, which I'll get to later. And then I have a third color, which just brings it to life, which can be done with windows or plant life. And you can even add more layers, like 4, 5, 6. But if you add too many, the build can tend to look very messy. So maybe don't do that. But 3 is like... 3 is the best in my opinion. The bare minimum would be 2, but I would suggest 3. But that's getting into a more complicated section of today's video. I'm going to go to the more simple section and get more complicated later on. Make your main block a block that isn't too annoying to get for the build that you need and doesn't look horrendous. Now people. I know that you like flexing those riches. You like being rich, you like showing people how much money in Minecraft you have, but people. Mineral blocks don't really make very good builds when you use them like this. Now most of the things I'm going to say in this video will be my opinion, so don't get offended by them please. But builds like this don't really look overly great. The shape is reasonable, the roof is a bit too low, But it's mainly the block choice. The block choice just doesn't look very appealing. And it is actually possible to make like diamond and gold and emerald and, you know, all those mineral blocks look really good in a build. Just try and think about the way that you're flexing your riches. Like, for example, you could use them to make house decorations rather than the house. You could use them to decorate your Minecraft character with the new armor trims that are coming out in Minecraft 1.20. Just for me, and most of the other people looking at your builds, try and not do this. Now my main block, I'm going to go for stone brick. There we go. Now it looks more like, you know, a structure that could be possible in real life. And I will get more into the blocks later because the block category kind of covers most of the build. I'm also going to add a door here, but let's go back to the blocks for a moment. This is only one block, two if you include the door. There is not really much to look at here, it's just a box with one block. I would suggest having more than one block in it. Don't make the roof out of the same block. You can make the roof out of a different block, like dark oak. Let's go for dark oak. But the house is still missing something. Actually, it's missing a lot. But what I mean here is windows. And I actually have two separate tips for windows. Okay, my first tip is don't build out of regular glass. Now you might be thinking, why on earth not? Well, the texture, in my opinion, doesn't actually look overly effective in the style that most people use it. It can, but a lot of people don't really use it right. And I think something like white glass tends to work a lot better. It adds more color to the build, which brings me to my third and final color. So now we have all three of the three colors in our build. And look at that. Look how much better this house just got by purely adding windows. And tip number 5 is depth. Now, I said that I had 2 tips involving windows. Basically, use glass panes. I would not suggest using glass blocks unless you specifically need them for the build that you're trying to do, because it adds depth to the build if you use glass panes. Glass panes also provide a more realistic looking window, if that's the style that you're looking for. I know the community loves making Minecraft realistic. And look at that. I don't know if you'll agree with me here, but I think that this looks a lot better. Now, the other thing about depth is there's a lot that you can do, like what I've done here with the roof, is that you can make it a lot, you can add a lot of small amounts of depth to the build without having to do too much work. Like the glass panes are cheaper than the glass blocks. Actually, I don't know, that might be a lie. When you get the glass blocks and you craft them into the panes, you get more panes than you do blocks. So it's probably easier to build out of the panes anyway. And it's not easy to build out of them, they're a pain to deal with, but I mean, look how small the hitbox is. But doing stuff like this really just helps the build feel more depth. Number 6. Now, this is not an insane shaped house, okay? There's a lot more shape that I can add to this, and I will add to it now. Basically, a straight up square can work as a house. In fact, my Strangecraft house is a straight up square. Or my starter base house anyway. But that doesn't mean that you can't make a build more interesting by adding more shape to it. For example, if I just simply build along the side here. But just adding a bit of shape to it really helps. And another thing with the windows is try and make them more interesting. This is shape-wise, is when putting in the windows, put them in a more interesting kind of spot. Like here, I've made this window bigger. If you look over here, I've kind of spaced them out a bit, and if you look over here, the different sizes, make the windows a bit interesting. Don't make all the windows the same. And you know what, windows could actually deserve a whole other video. Windows are complicated. If you like this video, then I might do more. And now we have a much more interesting shaped house. And this isn't even like a massive change, but it's more spacious. It's a different shape. You can even do other stuff. You can like cut out segments of it. You can just make random parts of it longer. You know what, I actually might do that. But there we go. Now the house has even more shape. And you can add even more shape to the house as well. I could add a bit more to the back. I won't for the sake of the video right now, but you could add even more shape to this. And this kind of goes back to the depth thing. But number 7, framing. Now, not all houses need framing. In fact, a lot of them don't. But framing is a tactic that I love. It's really good for getting that secondary color for the builds. If you can see the build here, you might be able to tell that the main colors I've gone for are brown, gray, and white. And framing is a really good way to bring those extra colors into the build. I suggest framing with stuff like the pillared blocks, like pillared quartz, or the logs and stuff like that, because they can make really good framing. I tend to try and avoid framing out of stuff like the planks, because I don't really think it looks very good, but it can look good. It's just I don't. Almost all blocks in the game, in fact all of them, I'm going to say all of them, all of the blocks in the game can look good when used correctly. The only thing is that a lot of people don't use them correctly. Like earlier when I was saying that you can, to try to lean towards glass panes, glass blocks are a really good glass option for certain types of windows, and even one of my favorite types. So for my framing, I'm going to use stripped dark oak logs. And basically, framing is kind of interesting. You can do different types of framing. You can place it in the corners like this, and then you can have kind of a gap there. You can have like two pillars. As you can see here, I've left a gap with the windows to put a bit of framing in the corner. And I suggest leaving a block gap between your windows and your framing, because I think it brings the build together more. And look at that. Look how much better that looks now. That's a rather small addition too, but it makes it look more structurally intact, and it adds some extra color as well. I do still believe that this house is missing some rather good potential details though. Which brings me to number 8. The roof. What do I mean by the roof? I mean, you should add detail to the roof. One of my favorite things to do with the roof is to add a block of some kind under the overhangs, if you have overhangs, which I would suggest having in houses like the style that I've gone for here. And you can just place a block, maybe slabs, maybe stairs under it, and it adds quite a nice color as well. It adds extra color, and you know what, I'm gonna make an attempt of using diorite here, and I could regret this, but with the underneath of the roof you can mix in stairs and slabs to have quite a nice sort of style here, and then you can even, you know, have a gap there, have that kind of thing. You know, it makes the house look a lot more interesting. And honestly, this isn't even really that difficult to do. Like, diorite isn't very expensive. I mean, you can also use other blocks like copper, which are more expensive, but still, copper's not overly rare either. And there we go, we've added some more shape. We've added some more color. I've also stuck with the theme when building. Try and stick in your main color scheme. You can add more colors, but remember what I said earlier. Try not to add too many or it can become messy. But I'm not yet finished with the roof, because another thing that you should always try and do is think about what shape your roof could be in, and whether the shape that you've gone for is the roof in its best light. Because this roof could be triangular shaped, it could go inwards, there could be a gap, the wall could extend upwards, it could form into a point, there could be, there's many possibilities for roof design, and I'm going to give you an example now. I've never really seen a video like this where they've taken the worst possible house and then slowly done a step-by-step on improving it. But when making roofs like this, always put stairs under it. It just makes it look better. And there we go. I've done the roof. And as you can see, adding that shape really affected the build. You may realize that parts of the build don't really line up with the roof design that you've gone for. You may need to alter the design. You can play around with slabs and stairs. You can use slabs on the roof. I've used some slabs. I've used some stairs. And you know, it's also good to add some detail to this sort of area here as well. Like I've added this sort of gap section in the stairs. I don't really know what I would call that. I just call that a decorative feature. But remember earlier what I was saying about framing. You can use framing on the roof as well. Let me grab a block to demonstrate this, let's go for andesite. I love polished andesite, it's really nice. You can use those to add a whole extra bit of detail to the roof. This is pretty nice. I'm pretty happy with this. I'm not sure about the roof framing here. That could use some work, but hey, it's all about experimentation. That's pretty much it for the roof, but I am going to list some small roof decorations that you could use to make your roofs better that can be very easily forgettable. For example, things like points on the roof, like you could have a chapel, or you could have just like a point. I don't know. I'll give you a demonstration like that. There we go. It's a point on the roof. Just adds a bit more detail. But that's it for the roof category. And now we get to tip number 9, and this one's a bit more of a complex one that a lot of people probably would choose not to worry about until you've gotten the others pretty much down pat. But this one is gradients. Now these can be complicated, but basically I'll explain what I mean. Let's use a grey gradient because there's a lot of grey blocks in the game and it's a very easy one to work with. So I'm going to have a brick wall, okay? But I want it to look sort of damaged, as though, you know, a lot of damage has happened to it. So let's grab some more blocks to do that with. Okay, so we could say the bottom could be gravel, and then the next row could be sort of like cobblestone-ish. And then basically as you go up or as you go down, you fade out certain blocks. So I want this to look as though the wall is old and it's sort of been cracking under the pressure of, you know, being such a large wall. Now this is a bit of a rough gradient. I would probably normally put more time into it than this. But that's an example of the kind of thing that you can do. And it adds more variety and more texture when you look at the build. And the thing about gradients is a lot of the time they're not really even that noticeable unless you're close to the build, but when you look at it from afar, it still makes it look more interesting. And they make you look a lot more of a builder when you look at the build. It makes it look a lot more detailed. Now there's other gradients besides the one that I showed you there. I'm just going to go around this house and sort of try and add a bit of a gradient to the build. And I've finished the gradient, and if you look at the wall now, you can probably see that it's a lot more story filled, I guess. It looks older. But as I said before, gradients can be complicated, so to show you a few more examples of gradients, I've laid out a few more here. There's this orangey browny one. This one's also meant to look as though it gets more intact as it goes up the wall. There's this one here, which is a more simple one because it's only transitioning between two blocks, and those ones can also work very well. And finally this one, and this one is probably the most noticeable one, and that's because it's a much larger transition. It's like starting real dark and then getting real bright. And if I was further away from it, like if I come all the way over here, the orange one is barely even noticeable as a gradient anymore. Same with the prismarine one. But the black one, transitioning to the grey, looks a lot more noticeable from afar. And this brings us to step number 10, the final step, extra details. And by extra details, I mean stuff like lighting. You can hang lanterns on things, you can add plant life, you can make it look more like intentional plant life and not like it's just like growing around the house, but if you want a more overgrown look, you can place bushes all around it, you know, stuff like that. I might add like a pipe or something over here. One of my favorite tree designs, I don't remember where I saw this. There's a lot of building tricks, I don't know who came up with them, but I like them and I use them a lot. Is this tree design, like a little baby tree, but it's bigger than a sapling but not massive. You can even make some of the little trees taller. You know, there's a lot that you can do here. If you want a video on interior, let me know in the comments. I've also put a sea lantern in here because I didn't really have anything else to put there. I also added these little spikes, these extra ones on the roof. Extended the framing up a little bit. There's little things that you can do. If you think to yourself, I think this would look better, then I suggest taking the risk. one, you can almost always just fix it, and two, it might look better. And that is the build complete. Now, I could have gone much bigger than this, but I didn't for the purpose of I can't go too big, otherwise I won't be able to get the video out in the 2-day period that I'm working on it. But I hope that these 10 simple steps are enough to, improve your building somewhat. I apologize if you already knew a lot of these. Some of them were rather simple, as the title said. But anyway, thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe. That would be greatly appreciated. And let me know in the comments if you want another video like this. I could do like a, I don't know, 20 building tips, 50 building tips. I could go to 100. I could do 100. I might have to speedrun it though, because this video took a long time. Anyway, thank you, and I'll see you all in the next video that I make. Goodbye!